Have you been looking for speech therapy for months, but no one is available? Or maybe with the situation that we face these days, many clinics have closed down. I remember when we first moved out here to the Tacoma, Washington area, I would hear stories from families about how they would be on wait lists for 6 to 12 months, and I just couldn't believe it. A kid is just so much different 6 months later, a year later, especially with their speech and language skills. And 2020, of course, have thrown us all for a loop. So I totally get it that you may be struggling or having a hard time finding services for your kiddo. Personally, I'm a huge fan of in-person interactions and communications. There's just something that technology can't replace in that regard. But if that is not an option for you, or if it's really been hard to come by, you can always try a new thing: online speech therapy. And in fact, online speech therapy isn't really all that new. It has definitely become more popular this year with all of the closures and the pandemic and whatnot, but it's actually been around for a long time, decades in fact. And online and in-person speech therapy both have the same goals for your kiddo. We definitely want to help see them progress in their speech and language so that they can communicate more clearly with others. When it comes to online speech therapy, SLPs and SLPAs, speech therapists, they can find similar resources that they would be using in person online, whether it be games or books. Oftentimes we'll use a blank writing board similar to an old school whiteboard or a chalkboard. Speech therapists use visual and audio supports. So there's lots of ways that speech therapy online can still be just as interactive as if your child was in person with a therapist. It's quite different from sitting your child in front of the computer to watch a video or an app, whether it be ABC Mouse or any other learning activities. Those definitely have their place and they're definitely important, but speech therapy online is different because the speech therapist is there in person working with your child. So it's more interactive and more tailored and personalized to your child. There are some additional added benefits to pursuing speech therapy online. You can, of course, schedule sessions at a time that's maybe more convenient for you. If you've got a whole gang of kids, the idea of lugging them all, dragging them into the car, driving them over to a clinic, that may just not be what is ideal for you. So being able to be at home in the comfort of your home, or the other kids are doing something else, maybe you're needing to get some work done on your own, and your child is able to do speech therapy sessions there, and services don't have to be interrupted. When it comes to, again, comparing online speech therapy to just, say, doing things on your own, it's a little different than, say, homeschooling, because speech therapists are skilled and educated in the areas of speech and language, so they have valuable insights into what your child needs. And while your child is at home, they can see in real time, in real life examples, what those challenges might be. So for instance, if you're bringing your child to a clinic, it's more of a manufactured setting, right? They're in a little room, maybe there's no distractions, maybe they've got toys and materials that the therapist is providing that you might not have at home. But when you're doing speech therapy online, it's in your home. So the therapist can see what are some practical everyday routines that your child may be doing well at or maybe struggling with. And the therapist can take a look and see what your environment looks like. Maybe there's ideas that the therapist can give you in terms of maybe if we take some of these toys or put it over here, or put some pictures to label some places, so the therapist can see in real time what the environment looks like for your child on a day-to-day basis and can give you practical tips to help their speech and language in that setting. A couple of tips, additional tips to get the most out of online speech therapy if that's the route you choose to pursue. I would encourage you to prep your child a little bit, whatever is most appropriate for your child's language and comprehension level, to tell them and get them excited about it, that it'll be a fun experience, especially if they used to go to speech therapy before COVID and they actually had a therapist that they were working with. You can tell them like, hey, you're going to meet with Miss Jessica or Miss Michelle, and it's going to be so much fun. They're going to see you through the computer, just kind of giving them a heads up of what they should expect. Again, if your child is used to being on the computer on their own and not used to a therapist or an adult being there teaching them and guiding them along the way, it's going to be a little bit different because the child can't just click around and do whatever they want to do. They need to be following the directions of the therapist or the teacher. So prepping them ahead of time is going to set them up for more success. During the session itself, I recommend that you hold the session in a quiet but well-lit area. Now that we've all been going through this for the past 6-7 months, we've all been on several Zoom calls and Skype calls and FaceTime and all the things, and we know that a well-lit area makes a huge difference, especially when it comes to speech therapy, because the therapist needs to be able to see your child's face, see your child's mouth to make sure they're pronouncing the sounds correctly, see what their body language looks like if they're working on social skills. If the room is dark or it's cluttered or your child doesn't have the camera set to their face, it's going to be really hard for the therapist to get the most out of their time together. So be sure that you're setting up your child, again, for getting the most benefit from these online speech therapy sessions by putting them in a well-lit, quiet area. Along with that, make sure that there's no distractions around, or as much as possible. We all know that life happens, but as much as possible, if there's other kids, maybe they can go to another part of the house. If there's super exciting toys that your child likes, make sure that those are hidden away in a cupboard or really put away so that the child isn't more distracted by wanting to play with a toy than they are with interacting with the therapist online. Internet connection, of course, some of this is out of our control, but as much as possible, try to have a really strong, reliable internet connection, whether it means plugging in your computer or, turning off other devices that may be using the Wi-Fi at that time. Again, for that half an hour or 45 minutes or hour, however long the therapy session is, you want to be sure you're getting the most out of it for your child. And then be present and engaged during the session. This is both for your child, but also for you as the parent or caregiver. It's important, especially for the younger kids, for an adult to be present to help them with any tech issues. Whether it's learning to click on the appropriate thing or moving their mouse, or, we've all done it before where we click on a different window and then we lose the window that we meant to be on. So anytime that your child is doing online speech therapy, try to be sure that there's another adult present, or at least in the room or within earshot, so that if the therapist is having some tech trouble or your child's having some tech trouble, the therapist can call out to you and somebody can come and help your child. Also, to get the most out of it, whether you've been in clinic in person for speech therapy or not, sometimes the parent or the guardian being in the session with a child isn't always productive for the child. But online, again, because you're going to be there, you can start to now learn some tips and tools from the speech therapist that you can then carry out on your own at home, which again is just another added benefit, is that you're able to see what the therapist is doing directly with your child so that you can help encourage them to practice or change some of the techniques that you've been using to carry that through at home, because that will only help your child progress faster in their speech and language skills. So just some final thoughts to leave you on. Maybe you don't have the option to do speech therapy in person, but your child needs some support. Whatever the reason, whether it's you need to keep your family safe, maybe someone has some health issues that you're concerned about, maybe you live in an area where there aren't readily available some private practice therapy clinics, whether they've closed down or you just live far away from them. Maybe there's long wait lists for in-person. Or maybe your child only was getting speech therapy through the schools, and now that's either not an option or not an ideal option, whether it's, 10, 15 minutes here or there online, or they've been having tech issues, or whatever the reason. Just know that there are other options to get your child some support. I encourage you to find out if online speech therapy is right for your child by calling out and scheduling a consult with a speech therapist who offers that service. Definitely here at Fluence Children's Therapy, we are offering both online and in-person sessions for children throughout the state of Washington. And that's another benefit that we can do, is that even if you live in a rural or remote area, there are other options, because now with technology we can go in different places. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any comments or experiences of your own regarding online speech therapy, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and we'll see you soon.